1990 Marvel Universe. Did we cash or did we crash? Let's find out. What's up YouTube? Card Boss here. We talk about everything cards, money, investing. Alright, let's go. So for those of you who are basically into cards in the most part of this year, whether it's in Magic or Pokemon or sports, if you haven't been aware of what's going on with the 1990 Marvel Universe phenomenon, you'd probably be living under a rock. And why I say that is because from sometime, let's say around end of January to early March, you could literally buy any of your favorite character, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Captain America, and perhaps flip it for 10x, 20x, 30x. But this was something that was not sustainable. So before we get into all that, I want to talk a bit about Marvel history. I guess for most of you who is listening to this right now, you probably lived through the 80s and 90s, whereby we had the comic book era, and you'd probably be quite familiar with your favorite characters like Spider-Man, Wolverine, X-Men, and even though they dated much way before the 80s and 90s and way back to the 60s. So unlike sports cards, which already exist during the 60s, it took Marvel about 30 years to produce their first set by Impel, which is the set that we're going to talk about today. The set itself, by and large, is not a huge set, right? 162 cards, but because this is the very first set, every character would be considered a rookie card. So you would find a very disproportionate rookie cards at about 54%, which is huge. And the only other release of cards that comes to mind that mirrors something similar would be the 2012 basketball Prism, the first year of Prism, whereby again you had two awesome class of rookie cards in there, and the rookie cards alone make up about a third of the set. So what actually happened with Marvel to cause that huge price spike? Basically, with people staying at home due to COVID, started to get on eBay and have a look at graded cards in general, and they realized that some of these graded cards for 1990 Marvel were at really crazy prices. Like a PSA 10 Spider-Man was like $1,000. You had Wolverine at like 1,500, and they look back at the raw versions of these cards, and they were literally at $5, $10, and they soon realized that there was a huge arbitrage to play here, and that actually caused a spike in the sealed box prices, whereby I think that you could easily get a box for like $100 start of 2020, and it was shooting up to the 4 digits on the start of 2021. Now, I can't say for sure whether or not the people who are buying these boxes are cracking each of these boxes to submit the cards to PSA. So you would have about 432 cards per box. And if you were to pay like $1,500 for a box, it works up to be about like $3 a card. So that's pretty good if you could actually get PSA 10 on them. You put in like, a $50 regular or a $75 express based on the pricing at that point in time, and flip it to get $1,000, only if that you could get everything back at 10. Problem was the quality of the print for the 1990 Marvel was horrendous. Now I do admit that each sealed box you will get pack fresh cards with nice corners and good edges, but the centering was horrible. So if you check out some of the back videos, right, I would assume that you probably would just get a handful of PSA 10 worthy cards and maybe a dozen more so of PSA 9s. That being said, you probably could make back your money if, let's say, for example, you get like 5 10s and 10 9s, but provided that the cards that you submit to PSA are of good characters, like the popular guys, because PSA 10 on, like, let's say, Dormammu wouldn't fetch like $1,000, it would be like a couple hundred at most. So that actually reduces your return overall. So I guess if I was trying to make money on this, putting $1,000 or $1,500 on a sealed box and essentially trying to gamble out a set of PSA 10s or PSA 9s of worthy characters wouldn't make much of a sustainable strategy. But I knew that I had to find a way to get as many quality looks as possible with as many cards and as quickly as possible. So I ironed out a strategy. So the strategy was to basically buy as many complete sets, lots, and bundles for as cheap as possible. I was fully aware that the cards being close to 30 years and likely kept in a garage somewhere wouldn't be in best of shape. But if I did my math correctly and worked out my odds properly, I would probably come out on top. So let's discuss the results. So first, let me lay the landscape for you guys on present day. I'm recording this towards end of May. PSA has been closed for about 2.5 months now, and prices of PSA 10 Wolverine just closed on eBay for about $350. For those who managed to submit cards to PSA before the closure, before the shutdown in March, with express orders, probably would have got their cards back by now. But looking at the prices today, they gotta be disappointed with the returns. Similarly, I would expect like PSA is probably holding like thousands of Marvel cards, sitting at their value section, and it's just going to be a matter of time before everybody's going to get back to Marvel and push everything to market, and they realize that again the returns, what they assume was back in March, early March, or even in February, it's way different when they're going to get back their cards, say end of this year or early next. So again, everybody talks about buy low, sell high. It's always easier said than done. And there is some intricate strategies that you have to put in place in order for you to be able to maximize your return. So you can't really just buy a box for 1,500, pick out the best 15 cards and send them for grading, to try and make back your capital plus grading fees and see whether or not you can actually 3x, 4x, or 5x. Now, I'm not saying that that's impossible, but the chances of failure far outweighs the chances of success. So let's dive into what I did. I basically spent about $4,000 to buy up lots, bundles, complete sets, to try and filter through and pick up what I would think that would be PSA worthy. And true enough, after filtering through like about 5,000 cards, I ended up with only 115, and that's just a meager 2%. I guess if you cost average $4,000 over 115 cards, you get roughly about like $35 to $40. Isn't a big number compared to some of the sports cards that I buy to send to PSA, but I wasn't gonna let like 4,000 cards sitting around the house doing nothing. So I decided to put together my own complete sets, bundles, lots, and moved everything up as much as I could. And as you can see in this final photo, that's the final lot of Marvel cards which didn't make it to PSA that I gladly sold for like $150. So end of the day, I sold about close to 2,800 worth of cards through eBay mostly, and I ended up with a cost base of just slightly under 1,200, which now reduces the cost base of my 115 cards from $30 to only $10. Now, $10 doesn't seem like a very small number compared to some of the raws that you could still buy for $1 or $2. But bear in mind, these 115 are the cream, which means that they are likely PSA 9 candidates. If I get lucky, a bunch of them would be on PSA 10s. So here's a little forecast of the 115 cards that I have with PSA. Now, all of them today are still with PSA, and I did factor in the change in prices in my forecast compared to what was in February and what's it today. I don't foresee the prices really depreciate much from here on because it's considered pretty low for the time being. But if you can see in this table, I kind of picked up my 30 best cards and listed up of what I exactly submitted to PSA, and the others represent the 85 cards which you can see there. So once I impute in the expected PSA 9 prices today and I factor in grading fees, you could see that I just roughly came slightly under like $200, or I would call it break even, but that's assuming that my 85 cards worth zero. And that's assuming that I got everything back as a PSA 9. So when I conservatively added in, let's say $30 for the remaining 85 cards in PSA 9, that's when I make my money. And you can see that I profit about 2,400 on initial cost of about 2,500 grading fees and cost of cards included. And that's assuming that everything's in line, which there's a pretty high chance of that happening. In fact, I would assume that perhaps at least 20% of that number, i.e. about 20 cards, would come in a PSA 10. No doubt there would some that might slip through the cracks and get a PSA 8, but all in all, PSA 9 on average is a pretty good conservative estimate. So in conclusion, buying something like Marvel Universe 1990 when it was on a real upswing in February can be pretty tricky, because as what you can see right now today, you have PSA 10 of Wolverines at 350 compared to 1500 kind of like 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago. And for those people who didn't really iron out their strategies properly back then, but kind of like we might feel the burn today. So my strategy of investing, I wouldn't say it's conservative, but I always like to protect the downsides. So I always make sure that I would give myself the best odds to make money. Now, not necessarily I can make the most money compared to some other guys, but end of the day, I would still come up on top in the long run. So if you guys like this video and found it very useful, do like and subscribe for more content in the future. I will be putting up similar videos, so do watch out for that. Thanks and have a great day.